You guys, and welcome back to the Live For You podcast. I am your host, Brad. I'm starting to video or put myself in video now. Just trying out a different form, trying to make it available in a different type of platform as well, not just audio. Perhaps it'll, make the message come out a little bit better, and the message will be able to be understood. So I know for everybody it's not always just listening. Sometimes it's actually seeing the person talk. And so yeah, that's one reason why I decided to do video. But today I wanted to talk about traumas and why they matter. I'm also going to share, to me, which was a very traumatic experience, something that actually got me introduced to traumas, to start focusing on them, and perhaps little moments that I thought had no impact, but they actually shaped a lot of who I was. And first of all, I just want to talk about why they matter and how they shape us. So basically, the way I like to put traumas is that suppose you're a system. Suppose you are a computer software, and kind of like your phone, every month, every couple of months, you're always having to update that software. It fixes bugs on your phone. It makes things run a lot smoother. It blocks viruses, whatever it may be as far as why we need to update our phone, so it can run more efficiently. Imagine if we were to never update our phone, to never update our computer software, then we wouldn't have evolved, right? We could still use the computer, we can still use the phone, but it's going to be slow, and things are not going to run as smoothly. It's not going to function properly. You're not going to be able to do as many things, with not the current software. And so it gets to a point where you've been kind of like putting off of updating it, and you start to forget about why it needs to be updated in the first place. Why it's such a big deal, and you start to look at other things when really it was just, you just need to update the software, just at the click of a button. But now you have viruses, now you have someone leaking into your personal info. It's, it may not be in your control. And of course, this is an analogy for traumas, because something can happen to you today and it makes you feel something, right? It makes you feel something you've never felt before, and you quite don't know how to process it. And so, of course, if the feeling is overwhelming, it's not to say that you should process it in that moment, but you need to give it thought, because in the same way in your life, if you don't update your software, right? If you keep on hitting cancel, or you keep hitting that button like remind me to update it later, and that you're not going to do it, this trauma is going to disappear. Kind of like when that pop-up on your phone, you say remind me later, it disappears for a little bit, right? But then it always pops up again, and you're I think a lot of the times we very much underestimate ourselves, or I guess that's, my experience, that it's like your body, and this is kind of like a spiritual answer, but it's almost your soul, your intuition knows that okay, you're not listening to me in this way. I'm gonna present it to you in a more drastic way. That way you can finally hit install the new software, until you finally hit update. And so the more you just ignore your traumas, the more you underestimate what you may think is small, but it actually made you feel, a very certain way. You need to give it the respect it deserves, because it's how you feel. A lot of the times I feel that certain people, they just kind of look at what other people are feeling, how they're feeling great, how they're feeling this, how they don't let small problems affect them, and you kind of subconsciously compare yourself. And that's why you put traumas away, because you don't, as I said, you don't give it the respect it deserves. As small as it may be to you, it did make you feel a certain way. And just the more time you let pass of not processing that feeling, trying to understand it, trying to change the narrative, then it's so much time is gonna cross in front of you that you're going to start to feel confused. You're going to start to feel, so many different things are going to happen in your life. You hear many different things. You then start to correlate what you're either, listening to, the people who are around, what you watch. You're going to start to correlate that into that unknown feeling, and then it just gets it all gets very messy and very hard to unscramble. And so that's why you need to be very aware. Of course, in order to fix something, you first need to know that there is a problem, right? And not underestimate it. I think that's probably one of the first key things you should do when thinking about a feeling that you don't really know what it is, but you very vividly remember it. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason why we can remember something down to the T, down to how hot it was, down to the, suppose if you're in a house, like down to like how the air conditioning was, down to what was playing on the TV, what was I listening to, who did I see that day, just every specific detail. There's a reason that it's so vivid, and that's because you have held it with you. Because you know that it's something that you never quite processed and that you're just running away from. And so they shape us, because since we don't process these traumas, although we may not recognize them as traumas, we don't recognize them as anything, right? Otherwise we would pay more attention to it. But the reason they shape us is because they form our perspective. They perform our view on the world. And of course, because it's a very foreign feeling to you, it's gonna make you avoid it. We don't, I think as humans, when you think about the phrase, you're only human, that means that you're emotional, you're gonna mess up, and that's a beauty of a human, that we do get to feel, and with that comes so many different things. So with that uncomfortable feeling that we never, as I said, that is foreign, we don't want to understand it, because as part of our human nature, we don't like new, we like comfortable. We are creatures of habit, but we get to decide which habits we want to adopt and which habits will shape us into the person that we want to be. And so of course, when when there is that chink in your chain, it starts to form its own view that you didn't choose. You would only choose if you process that feeling, but now it's almost out of your hands because you're choosing to ignore that aspect. But that aspect is very important. And this is another interesting thing as well, is that as humans, it's within our nature to kind of linger on to negative associations. I was reading this the other day that basically this is why first impressions are so important. This is an example. You are far more likely to remember a bad first impression than a good first impression. And that's natural, unless of course you have trained your mind to view things in a very positive way, but that takes much more effort than the negativity coming into your mind. And so that's why you need to be very conscious and you need to be very aware. You need to have more practice of being positive than of being negative, basically. And to prove that, there are many stimulants of your mind, and even negative things can allow drops of dopamine to occur in your brain. And just at the top of my head, doing drugs, negative thing, gets you a lot of dopamine. Drinking alcohol, negative thing, drops a lot of dopamine. This one was very interesting, but I actually experienced it, is victimization, is envisioning yourself going through something troubling. It makes you feel special. You are a victim, and therefore you are pitied on. And as kind of ridiculous as that sounds, I mean that it is a stimulant. It does make us not feel good in a certain way, but the fact that it makes us feel special is why it stimulates our mind. And for those who are unaware and who are unconscious, they kind of play that narrative very much, and it's just a vicious cycle that they just keep replaying, and they never really want to fix it or get over it. I'll go down into the traumatic experience that I had. It was one summer after 4th grade. Yeah, my dad had told me that I needed to go to Peru for about a month, because at that time he had moved to Peru full time because he just needed to help out with family members, his dad specifically. And he told me, he's like, he had a girlfriend at the time in Peru. He was separated from my mom. He had a girlfriend in Peru who was a dentist. She had her own office, and so basically I could get my teeth done for free. So he tells me, Brad, you're coming with me to Peru because the last time you went, she said that you needed work done, and of course since it's free, like you're coming with me regardless. And as a kid, I was like maybe 4th grade, so I was like 8-9 years old. I didn't want to. I had just gone out of school. I was excited for the summer. And the last thing I wanted to do was just go to a different country. And not only that, but when I would travel outside the country before, I was with my brothers. So at least I had them, somewhere around my age group, and not just my dad. But nonetheless, like, I realized that me complaining and me whining just wasn't helping. I wasn't doing anything. And when I would turn to my mom, she looked like she didn't really had any say in the matter either, almost like she kind of agreed, like, yeah, if you're going to get your teeth done, you're going to. And at the time, like right now, it's like, oh, going to Peru for a summer. It's like I get to travel when I'm 8-9 years old. Like now I think of it as awesome. But I'll get to that later in a bit as to why the narrative is now changed. Because before, when I wasn't aware of it, I thought it was is a very traumatic thing, and until I realized that what happened that summer just very much shaped who I was and how I perceived the world. But after realizing that complaining and whining it was not going to get me to stay, as much as I would like to, I I said, okay, all right, you're telling me a month? Okay, I'm going to stay a month. And so the week after, or no, I left before I actually finished fourth grade, because it got to a certain point, in elementary school where the teacher is done kind of like teaching you, and the last 2 weeks are basically just like for fun activities and just wrapping up the year. So my dad had discussed that with the teacher, and she let me go like about a week earlier. And so we went, and I was very social in school. I was with my friends, right? Not with like other people. It was either my friends or my family. But nonetheless, I was pretty social. And and then when I went to Peru is like where I completely like shut down. Like I just became a different person. I did not come back the same kid. I was I was constantly thinking about what other people thought about me. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Like I felt so isolated. And the reason being was because when I was in Peru, after a month, I would tell my dad, I asked my dad, I said, okay, it's been a month. Can I go back now? His girlfriend's name was Marcia. And he's like, no, Marcia says you still have a couple of other things to do with your teeth. So you got to stay. And I was like, but you told me I could leave. What happened to that promise? What happened to you saying to that? And he's like, and I felt dismissed, and of course at the time I didn't know what to think. I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to go back with my brothers, with my family, with my friends, and I just wanted everything to go back to normal. And so it was after 2 months that I decided, I'm like, all right, listen, clearly he lied to me, and he knew this whole time that I was going to be staying longer. So let me sit him down and let me actually express how I'm feeling. And also, like, I was a very sensitive kid as well, and I miss my mom. It's not only like friends or just doing what I want, but I also like I wanted to be with my mom. And so I chose to be vulnerable. I sat him down. I was like, Dad, like, listen, you told me it would be a month. It's now 2 months. Like, the summer's almost over. I don't want to be here all summer. Like, can I please go back? Can I please go back? Basically begging him. And again, he dismissed me. And what happened next was where like the trauma, where that that light bulb came on and just completely switched who I was, is that sadness and that wanting to go back to my mom and my friends and just my normal life back in Florida. When he dismissed me, even though I was being vulnerable, it turned into rage, and I tried to hit him. And now and now that I think about it, it's funny because when I tried to hit him, there was like a table on my right side. And this is kind of how I was saying about how certain things are so vivid, right? Like that's why you should always pay close attention to the things that happened years ago, that you can just remember every detail. We were at the dining room table. It was in the morning, shortly after I woke up. And so yeah, I tried to hit him, but there was this table on my right side that was like kind of close. So, and I was trying to do it fast. So when I tried to get up and hit him, my right hand like hit the other table that was next to me. And as I said, right now it's kind of funny, but at the time, my dad, he had just realized what I tried to do. I'm not going to disclose what certain parents do, but my dad had come from that type of upbringing. What disciplining your kid now is nowhere near as what disciplining your kid was then. But what I basically got from that experience, which what changed me, was that if I can't tell my father in a very vulnerable and emotional state, it wasn't about just like not him getting me a toy or not him buying me a game or like me just whining. It was actual me being very sentimental and wanting to go home. And I thought to myself, if I can't tell my dad this and I can't be vulnerable to him, and he's just gonna dismiss me at such a young age, then who can I tell? Who can I open up to? And at that point, I would only think my mom. But when I went back after that moment, I had just I didn't want to go out anymore, and I just completely stayed in the house for just playing video games or watching movies. And I would, for the rest of the summer, that's what I did. And summer's like 3 months, so I basically did that for another month and a half, just every day from the morning till night, just playing video games and watching movies. Because I didn't, like, for one, I felt ashamed of trying to hit my own dad, but then also of how inconsiderate I thought he was, and that thought that I'm sharing with you, that if I can't tell something like this to my dad, who can I share anything with? And so, as I said, when I went back, I didn't think I could tell anything to anyone anymore. I didn't think it was worth it, because I thought I would just be let down. That's why I never very much accumulated that many friends afterwards. And it shaped a lot of who I was, for a long time, until I really started to pay attention, as to why I kept thinking about that moment. And so yeah, that was the awakening part, right? I noticed that memory had a huge significance in my life. And when I finally gave it the attention it deserved and changed the narrative, that's when I neutralized the memory. That's when I brought it back to a base where, yeah, it could have been a bad experience, right? Could have been traumatic, but there's also good things about it. And the way I look at things now is that you can always find a lighter side of things no matter what, and that just neutralizes something. So this is something that you could possibly do. First of all, you need to think on things, about certain memories that just pop up out of nowhere, and you don't really know why, but you remember them vividly. And this could have been something a week ago, this could have been something years ago, like it was for me. Like, I didn't realize this until I was 23, and I'm 25 now. I just turned 25. I didn't really like process it and neutralize it until a year and a half ago. So think about the moment that you remember vividly, that you feel very unsure of, and it keeps coming back to you. It may come back to you week after week or months or maybe even a year. But you just need to recognize the pattern and affirm the fact that it does keep coming back. And then you need to write all this down. You know what I mean? Just to actually like put it on something physical, so that way it's not just in your mind. So you list out the memory as much as you can remember, and then you want to list out the fear as to why it happened. You know, the what you felt from that experience. After you write what you felt from that experience, with a traumatic experience, it's a lot of it is negative or something you're very uncomfortable with. So write all of it down, you know, as clear as you can be, as specific as you can be, and then write out the fantasy. Write out how you wished it could have happened. So for instance, with my traumatic experience, what I would write in fantasy was that I wish my dad would have just let me go as soon as he saw how vulnerable I was, and then I could have spent the rest of my summer in Florida, back with my friends, back with my mom, just living out my summers like I would usually do in the past. And then next you're going to write out a time where it actually worked out that was very similar to that. So in my case, say I was very vulnerable with my mom at one point, you know, that things needed to change and I needed her help, and then she helped me. And then what you're going to do is you're going to list out the benefits as to why it happened. So when I did this, I put, what are the benefits of me having gone to Peru and experiencing that? So for one, I already named one of them. I was able to go to Peru. I'd already been there once. As a kid, this is something I'm proud of, but as a kid, I actually traveled quite frequently to South America and to Europe. But that's one thing. I got to travel 8-9 years old to Peru for basically a whole summer. I got to be in a different culture. It actually helped my Spanish speaking skills. I mean, because I was just around people speaking Spanish all the time. You know, I saw different streets. I ate different food. To me, the best type of food is Peruvian food, because it's so diverse. You know, those are benefits of it happening. Another benefit is that it made me more observant because I wasn't very social. So it made me very observant, which is something I'm proud of. And so, like, you see how it starts to form the way you are, because there was a roadblock, and because it was there, I had to find other routes, alternative routes. And I wouldn't have gone to those alternative routes if the roadblock wasn't there. And I'm glad I took those other routes, because it's who I am today, and you have to be proud of who you are, like, no matter what your circumstance. So list out the benefits of why it happened, and then you want to paint a fantasy as to how you wish it could have happened. So as I said before, we're going to go back to how you wish it happened. So I wish my dad had said yes and conformed to what I said, and he let me go back. It's like, okay, what are the drawbacks if that would have happened? It's like, okay, well, I could have gone back, but I wouldn't have seen Peru and experienced Peru much more than I did. Maybe my Spanish wouldn't have been as good. Maybe I wouldn't be as observant, so that means I would be more, I guess you could say, more naive, because I'm the type of person right now who, I'm a very vigorous thinker, and sometimes a little too much, but I like to think very analytically. But if I had just gotten my way, I probably wouldn't think this way. And I'm grateful I think this way because it applies to many aspects of my life, which I'm proud of. And then also think about go back to the time where actually something did work out that is kind of in the same situation. So I was thinking about a time where my mom helped. I mean, my mom always helps me, but I think about a time where she actually helped me and it did work out. Think about the drawbacks of that happening. It's like, oh yeah, she helped me, but maybe if she didn't, it would have helped me be more responsible, because then I wouldn't depend on my mom when I was younger. Or, to be honest, even just a few months ago. It's my mom has just always been there helping me. And so in those moments of struggle, she was there, but a drawback of that actually happening, maybe I'm not as responsible as I should be at my age. And so with this whole exercise, when I'm listing out the benefits of that traumatic experience that you remember, when you list out when you list out the fear as to why you don't want to experience it again. So I fear of opening up to somebody else because I think they're just going to let me down the way my father did. And then you have to do the drawbacks of the fantasy as to what if it did go well? Well, you wouldn't have been where you are. Certain good things in your life wouldn't have been so if your fantasy had played out. And then also do the drawbacks of when something actually did go in your favor, something that actually happened. And so what you do is you look at both sides of the spectrum. You look at both sides of the same coin. And because you realize that both of them are good and both of them are also bad, you take in consideration all aspects. You're looking at it from different perspectives. It's like, okay, you just kind of like shrug your shoulders and you're like, well, yeah, that bad thing, like, yeah, it made me feel this way, but I owe a lot my life to it because it shaped who I was. And it's like, okay, if I would have thought about it differently and it actually worked out, well, that may not have been the best thing. And so now what you're doing is you're just neutralizing it. You're just kind of like, you're processing it so that it has no effect. Either way, it played out the way it did, and as a result of that, you are the way you are right now. But you need to understand and you need to process it. Otherwise, your soul, your mind, even your body, it's not gonna work as efficiently as it can because that thought is not processed, and it's having a way bigger impact and effect on you than you give it credit for. So this is something that I always try to do, when I see that something has affected me, and I pay very close attention. And I don't do this with everything, because I don't try to create the traumatization. But at the same time, I now realize that it's very well possible. The smallest thing can mean the world to me, and it could shape my views. So I highly encourage you to try this exercise if there's anything in your life that you remember that you're uncomfortable feeling, but that there's a reason why. Just sit down, write it all, and see how you can change your perspective. How you can update your software. And I hope that you find success with it. If you have dealt something like this, it's very well much helped me. So I can only wish the best for you. think that'll do it. Thank you for listening, or for those of you who are listening, and for those of you who have checked the earlier episodes. As I said, I'm gonna start doing this in video, so you can kind of see me face to face. I realize that the quality probably isn't good because it's kind of getting dark out here, and I didn't want to stop talking or like interrupt the episode by turning on the light, but the next one will be much better. I'll probably do it a little bit earlier. But yeah, until then, thank you for listening. And again, I also write, just about certain thoughts like these on Substack. It's a newsletter that I do quite frequently. At least I try to do it at least once every week. But yeah, feel free to check that out if you prefer reading. Thank you again for listening, and talk to you guys in the next one.